one of the things that seems to be occurring right now in the third dimensional reality is there are two stratas of consciousness. There's those that hold their attention on the world is coming to an end, and there are those that pretty much are listening to this conversation that believe there is other ways of experiencing ourselves. And so the rigidness, which is part of the third dimension in my reality, third dimension, again, not being the chair you're sitting in or the house you're living in, that's form for those listening. Third dimension is this means in which you move around. So there's a rigidity, there's an always and never. There's vibrations that don't allow for that flexibility, whereas in the higher fourth dimension, fifth, sixth, there is much flexibility. So in this space where you're raising this default issue, there is a lot of that fear that's in there or that rigidity that's in there. It's being held by one grouping of consciousness, if I could be simple. The grouping of consciousness that's listening to this conversation, if you said to them, let's sit down at the table and figure out 10 different ways that this could be resolved, this grouping of people on the planet would come up with 10 different ways and probably 20 different ways that it would move through the process. So there's a flexibility that's being brought in through that higher fifth down into the higher fourth, third dimension, where people are beginning to wake up, and in that practicalness of waking up, starting to say, is there other ways?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And then let's throw the other one in there that you started with a moment ago, which is the idea of some sort of apocalypse occurring this year, which I do not think is the issue at all from my own point of view. But as we know, there's a tremendous number of people on the planet who are looking at this point in time that way. And the interesting thing about this is that maybe this is the last one. In other words, throughout my lifetime, I can think of about maybe 10 or 15 or 20 end-of-the-world dates. And if we go all the way back to Pauline Christianity and go back 2,000, 2,500 years ago when this end-of-the-world mentality was first introduced, there's been this continual waiting for the apocalypse. And maybe part of what is happening this year as we start to open these kind of higher frequencies now, maybe more and more people are just suddenly saying, gee whiz, everybody's been worried about this for 2,500 years, and it doesn't really have anything to do with anything, except if you sit around and wait for the apocalypse, then you don't take care of your family, you don't take care of your world, you don't take care of your community and civilization, which has occurred over and over and over again. In fact, we could make a case for the idea that this particular mindset is probably the most destructive element on this planet.
I would agree with you. You know, and there are those fundamental laws in the universe, and one of the most fundamental is, and everybody listening to this understands, but don't put a lot of attention on it, is my observation. This law of attraction, you know, my definition is what you put your attention on is what I, the universe who adores you, will provide for you. And so if you think it's the end or you don't think it's the end, if you believe it is or you believe it isn't, you're correct. And now in this duality, as this black and white is really coming into play here, that law of attraction seems to be manifesting itself in two different types of structures. Again, keeping that simple because it's obviously more complex. But the piece that is so fascinating to me, and I've seen in your astrology you touch on this, which I didn't mention, the level of astrology that you play in is magnificent to me. But one of the things that is occurring, in fact, occurring this very minute as we're talking, there was, as of a little while ago, a solar coronal hole that occurred that has produced a huge charged solar wind that has hit the Earth much faster than any of the other solar winds that have been produced to date, according to the scientists. This minute it's occurring. What I'm watching is that light that begins to come through the sun, a great amount of it through that galactic center into the various suns and into our sun. As I watch those frequencies of light stepping down eighth dimension, stepping down into the seventh, the sixth, the fifth, there is configurations that are passing through each one of us that, in my simpleness, is really just kind of erasing the who we are not, all that aspect of I'm not okay. And what I'm watching is the media talking about the dramas of the defaults in Greece and Afghanistan, etc. But the consciousness of the planet is stepping up into ways of other choices and not even remembering many of the dramas that they've had in their life to date. It's being more or less dissolved in present time.